What's up, everybody? I know it's been about a week since I've made a video. It's been pretty busy over here. Also, to be honest, it's tough finding time to make these videos with a newborn in the house right now. If any of you have kids, I'm sure you know they take a lot of time away from side projects. So in this video, I thought I'd go through and just talk about several companies that I've been asked about either in comments or on Discord. I'll give you my opinion. As always, none of this is advice to buy or sell any of the stocks that we talk about in this video. If you get value, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to join my Discord or grab my Google Sheets template here, then consider following me on Patreon. Link to that will be down below. Now, let's get into it. And the first company I want to talk about is General Mills. This has popped up in a couple comments. We can see they're up 2% today, but it's been a pretty negative story over the past year, down almost 40%, and even just in the past month, down almost 20%. If you live in the US, I'm sure you're familiar with this company. They make a bunch of snacks, cereals, granola bars, even pet food. A lot of brands that you might be familiar with are owned by General Mills. Several months ago, I mentioned General Mills in a video. I said, I just didn't think it was actually that cheap. It's a very simple company to understand. They manufacture and produce food. They sell that food to retailers, all the grocery stores that you shop at. And you can see their revenue here. It's basically been flat for 15 years. In fact, even just calling this flat is a little bit optimistic. In the past few years, revenue is down. And if we looked at revenue in real terms, over this time, it would be down significantly once you account for inflation. I think a lot of the reason that people think General Mills is very cheap is, one, they pay a good dividend, about 6 to 7% dividends at current prices, and also the multiple looks cheap relative to history. They have quite a bit of debt, about $13 billion in net debt, so I factor that in. I'm looking at their enterprise value to their operating income, and when you look at that multiple, trading for less than a 10 times multiple right now. In the past, it looks like their average has been maybe around 15 or 16 times multiple. Now, if you watch my previous videos, you know I really don't like to use historical multiples to value a company. Maybe something has changed, or maybe the market just got it wrong before. Maybe the market was exuberant on this business. And in spite of the strength of their brands and their decent operating margins, I mean, they're looking at high teens in operating margins for a food manufacturer. That's actually quite good. But in spite of that, they have no growth. I think there's probably a secular trend away from the sugary, unhealthy foods that General Mills is mainly known for producing. So with all that in mind, I mean, why should a company like this trade for a 16 times multiple? If I just assume going forward that this company has essentially no growth, which again, as I said, already maybe even a little bit optimistic, and I assume they keep roughly similar margins to what they have now, and I give this company a 10 times multiple, which I really can't give a company with significant debt and no growth more than a 10 times multiple. That's already more optimistic than I am with a lot of other businesses. And if these assumptions come true, I'm only looking at an 8% annualized return on General Mills. That's really not great. And you know, if you just want some quick back of the envelope math to calculate your return on an investment, you can think of returns from stocks coming from three components. One is going to be their growth. Another is going to be how much money they can give back to you, the shareholder. And a third is going to be any change in their multiple. Well, if you think the company's not really growing, and if you don't think that the multiple is going to change in any significant amount, I mean, this company has roughly a 7-ish% dividend yield right now. And I'm not sure I'd expect much more than that investing in this business. That's just my quick thoughts there. I don't think General Mills is deep value to me. Now, another company people have asked about is FactSet. If you're not in the investment world, you probably aren't familiar with what this company really does. FactSet basically sells financial data to investment companies, to research firms, to investment professionals. And in fact, I had a call with FactSet when I was looking for a company to power my Google Sheets add-on here. My add-on, which my template uses, when you type in a ticker right here and you hit load, it's going to load in all of this fundamental data about a business. I also have a brief description of the company. You're going to get a price quote, price chart as well. FactSet provides a very nice API to do all of this. I would say they're probably the industry standard for this type of data. They're used by many companies. They've been able to up their prices. They've been a long-term huge winner, but we see that over the past year, they've fallen off a ton. They're down, roughly 60-ish% from their peak here. Over the last 5 years, it doesn't look much better, down 40%. And right now they're trading at, 12 to 13 times multiple. So it's reasonable to ask, is this an opportunity here? The margins are incredible. Growth has been quite good. And yes, they appear to be trading for a very cheap multiple. On paper, this company looks like it's value. It looks like it's deep value possibly. My trouble with FactSet is this. First of all, you should know, I chose not to be a customer of FactSet. The price they were quoting me was very high, and I found an alternative solution. Effectively, most of the data that FactSet sells, it's public information. All of this stuff, revenue, operating income, even the price quotes, none of the data here, this description of the company, none of this is proprietary to FactSet. They compile third-party data and they sell it. Now, there's been a ton of talk recently about companies that are vulnerable to AI. Do software businesses have as big of a moat now that AI is here and maybe AI can make all of these programs? Well, if you ask me, if there's one thing that I think AI would be very good at, it's compiling essentially public data. I think the advantage of FactSet is it's just been a subscription for many investment firms for so long. They have a lot of recurring revenue, and that's certainly not going to disappear overnight. But in the long run, do I think that FactSet can charge, just thousands and thousands of dollars for compiling data that probably AI can deliver almost as well? The bottom line is I'm not sure. This really is a business model where I just don't know what the future of it is in an AI world. So for me, I'm just not going to buy FactSet here. I can't predict the future. It might be a decent investment. Yes, on paper, the numbers look cheap, but I think the risk here is higher than you might realize just by looking at the numbers. The next company I want to talk about is one we've mentioned on the channel before. It's JD.com. This is a stock I've owned for a couple years now. It was a big winner for me, and now it's basically back down to close to my cost basis. And while we've talked about this stock a few times, I don't think we've talked about them since their last quarterly report. If you're not familiar, JD.com is really like the Amazon of China. They have thousands of warehouses all over the country. Most orders are delivered the next day. They have the best distribution network of any of the major players over there, Alibaba, Pinduoduo. And while after COVID, growth stagnated a bit, it's been picking up recently the past couple years. On top of that, they have an enormous net cash position, and the profitability of the core business has been steadily improving over time. On the surface, you look at the company, it seems like margins are razor thin. You're talking, maybe 3 to 5% operating margins in the core business. But a lot of that, similar to Amazon when they were building out, a lot of that is because they've just been investing into their infrastructure, into the network. Recently, JD's been burning a lot of money trying to break into food delivery. That's basically this huge loss here in new businesses that we see. So there's definitely some things to worry about. And obviously, e-commerce in China is very competitive. There's been a bit of a price war in food delivery, which has been fueling that cash burn there. There's three major players here. So there's JD.com, who's the new entrant. And the two main players are, the biggest one is Meituan. And then the second biggest here is Ele.me, which is owned by Alibaba. State regulators don't like the discounting and the undercutting of prices that's going on here. So if that lessens, it would be bullish for these stocks. But ultimately, JD.com, they don't need food delivery in order to be a great investment from here. The reason why I think JD.com is going to be a long-term winner and is going to be a market leader for a very, very long time is simply because they have the best logistics network. In the US, why is Amazon so dominant? Couldn't someone just compete with Amazon? The fact of the matter is, there's lots of e-commerce websites in the US. But Amazon's main asset, it's not the website. Anyone can make a website with manufacturers and distributors. Amazon has a logistics network, a delivery network that really no one can match. For many items in most cities in the US, if you place an order, you could get that the next day. You can't replicate that. It takes years to build that out. That's what JD has built in China. And because they have the best distribution, I think they'll be able to gradually improve their margins over time. In my base case, and by the way, I've converted these into US dollars, I'm just looking at single-digit growth on the top line. The growth in 2025 was unnaturally accelerated by some subsidies from the government on electronics and appliances. I'm looking at just 5% growth a year over 5 years. Operating margins, I'm looking to expand to about 4 to 5% operating margin. Free cash flow margin, the cash coming back to shareholders, I'm just keeping that a little bit less than what they're doing right now. And I'm only giving the stock a 10 times multiple, which is really nothing demanding at all. And if these assumptions come true, I'm looking at more than a triple on my money over 5 years, a 26% annualized return. Of course, an elephant in the room here is this is a Chinese company. For some people, that will just make it a non-starter. That's totally fine. For me, I'm okay having a small portion of my portfolio allocated to China. And I like JD.com. Right now, it's the only Chinese company that is really a significant holding of mine. There's one other small company that's about a 1% holding. But bottom line, I like this stock. Now, while we're on the subject of e-commerce platforms, some people have asked me about Mercado Libre, ticker symbol MELI, M-E-L-I. The stock is down from its peak about 40%. Over the past 5 years, it's about roughly flat, I would say. If you manage to buy the perfect low here in 2022, you're still pretty happy, I'm sure. And if you're not familiar with MELI, they are a big e-commerce player in Latin America. They also have a pretty big fintech part of their business. The combination of e-commerce, fintech, and payments, it sort of reminds me of Kaspi, which if you follow the channel, you're probably familiar with. They are the market leader in all three of those categories in Kazakhstan, which is their main market. I like these businesses. They're very dominant companies. As they grow, profitability has been improving. The growth potential in Latin America, I think, is quite significant. My only issue with Mercado Libre in the past has simply been price. Now, I admit I have a bias for cheap companies. You probably could have guessed that simply by the name of this channel, Deep Value Hunter. It doesn't mean I'm opposed to buying companies you might think of as growth businesses. At several times in the past, Google has been my largest holding. I still hold Amazon in my portfolio, although now it's a smaller position. So I'm not opposed to buying businesses that look expensive if I think the risk reward is good, but it's true that my bias is for buying very cheap streams of cash flow. I want to be able to put in pretty conservative assumptions about growth in the future and come up with an excellent IRR, especially for a business where the actual returns to shareholders are many, many years out. Mercado Libre, they've stopped seriously diluting shareholders, but they're almost certainly not going to be returning capital to shareholders anytime soon. They will need to reinvest all their free cash flow back into the business because they're growing. And honestly, as investors, that's what we want for a business like this. And growth in the past has been exceptional, but as they get bigger, that's going to slow down. You can't grow 50% a year forever. Of course, there's risks here. There's always risk. If we have some, global recession that's brought on by commodity prices or something like that, then consumption is going to slow down. I put in roughly 20% growth every year for 5 years. Now, keep in mind, this assumption means that their revenue is going to get from a little less than 30 billion today to over 70 billion. These numbers are in US dollars, which actually brings me to another risk, is that a lot of the countries they're operating in, they have very high levels of inflation. As you may know, for Kaspi, one of the risks I talk about is inflation. You're taking on currency risk there. If these foreign currencies fall apart against the dollar, then that's seriously going to weigh on your dollar returns. I'm not saying that's going to materialize, but I think it's a risk not many people talk about with this company. In any case, if I give them 10% operating margins, which might be a little bit conservative, and I give them a 25 times multiple, which is certainly not conservative. In spite of the fact that they've traded for more expensive multiples in the past, a 25 times multiple is a premium. And if these assumptions come true, yeah, you're looking at a 16% annualized return. That's pretty good. But if sentiment falls apart, if this multiple comes down a bit, then your return goes down a lot as well, of course. For me, I like this company, but I just want to buy it for cheaper. For comparison, Kaspi trades for, roughly like a 6 times multiple right now. And Mercado Libre in Latin America, the growth is more significant. It's a bigger business. They deserve to trade for a higher multiple. But when I'm looking at it and I have the choice to, buy Mercado Libre at roughly a, 30-ish times multiple or Kaspi at a 6 times multiple, for me, the choice is clear. I like Mercado Libre. I want to buy it for a cheaper price. Finally, I want to talk about one more company because it seems to be a really popular one that people talk about on YouTube, and it is Fair Isaac, FICO. I actually made a video about this company last year. It was called something like The Danger of Quality Companies. At the time, I think the stock was trading about 16 or 1700. And I was basically making the case that, when you look at a chart like this, it looks incredible. And up here, no one really sees the risk. You say, FICO is a quality stock. This is a quality company. Why buy deep value when you can just buy a safe company like this? And let me start by saying I fundamentally reject the notion that you can determine how risky a stock is simply by looking at the chart. The chart is a backwards looking thing. You are looking at price historically. Risk has to do with events that have not yet transpired. Now the chart looks like this, and people want to talk about risk, that FICO is down, more than 50% from its peak. I still think FICO is quite a risky investment, and my reasons are basically the same as the video I made last year. But FICO is actually less risky at $1,000 a share than it was at $1,600, $1,700. And back then, certainly no one was talking about risk. They were just talking about how amazing the company was. First, just to talk about what FICO does, they have a couple lines of their business, but mainly they give credit scores. They basically are trying to determine how likely it is that someone is going to repay their debt. Frankly, if anyone had access to a large amount of data on a person, they probably could come up with a decent measure of that risk themselves. There's three major credit bureaus in the US. There's Equifax, there's Experian, and there's TransUnion, and they collect consumer information. They have a ton of data on your payment history. And the credit unions formed VantageScore, which is essentially a FICO alternative. VantageScore also comes up with a number that determines basically how likely you are to repay your debt. There's nothing all that special about what FICO is doing. What's special about FICO, and the reason why they've had just such incredible operating margins, I mean, we see their margins have gone from in the teens to, now close to 50% operating margins. What's going on here is if you have a mortgage in the US, and for most people, a mortgage, that's the largest amount of debt you're ever going to take out. That mortgage is almost certainly going to be bundled up and resold ultimately to Fannie and Freddie, to some government institution. And if that mortgage is going to end up in the hands of Fannie and Freddie, then basically by regulation, it has to have a FICO score attached to it. Fair Isaac has had a government-imposed monopoly, and that's allowed them to raise prices on their scores quite a bit. Now, defenders of Fair Isaac might say, hey, the cost of a credit score, it's actually very small in relation to the size of a mortgage. But when you're talking about millions and millions of mortgages and FICO raising costs year after year, then this really adds up. It's millions of dollars that consumers probably wouldn't have to pay if you had, competition between Fair Isaac and VantageScore and, maybe someone else, who knows? I think it's pretty risky to buy into a business when essentially the sole reason for their monopoly, the sole reason for their outperformance is the government. If they change regulations, I don't think you're going to have massive outperformance with Fair Isaac going forward. On the other hand, can you imagine Amazon not being a dominant player for years and years to come? I can't. These companies are in different leagues, and yet Fair Isaac has traded with a multiple of 40 or 50 times operating income. They're growing the top line 10%, which is pretty good. It's been consistent, but keep in mind, a lot of this growth on the top line, it's not from increased volume, it's not from increased business. It's simply because they're able to increase their fees every single year. If you even just have a little bit of competition, this isn't even a bear scenario. If I just have them still grow revenue 5% every year, so fees aren't going to come down. Operating margins, I'm not bringing them down. I'm keeping them here at, 48% or whatever it is. Free cash flow margin, I'm keeping it very high. I'm just bringing their multiple back to a 20 times multiple, which is still quite good. It's just nothing outlandish like they have been. If my assumptions in this scenario come true, you're looking at a 2% annualized return on FICO stock every year for 5 years. You'd essentially be flat on your money. And I haven't even considered a case where operating margins actually compress, where there's a ton of competition in the credit rating business. So for me, while by any metric you look at, Fair Isaac seems to be a high quality company, incredible margins, essentially no CapEx, able to increase their fees every single year, it's just going to be a pass for me. There is some price at which I think risk reward would be quite good, but it's a lot lower than $1,000 a share in my opinion. Obviously, I could be wrong. If Fair Isaac continues to be a monopoly for the next several decades, you'll probably do well. I just think the risk is a lot higher than most people realize. And with that, I think we'll end the video here. I know there's many things I'm behind on. I want to talk about Novo Nordisk. We have to talk about health insurance. I'm going to try to make more videos in the future. If you got value here, subscribe to the channel. If you want to join my Discord or grab my Google Sheets template here, then consider following me on Patreon. Link to that will be down below. If you agree or disagree with my opinion on any one of these stocks, let me know why down in the comments, and I hope to see you all in another video.